The porch rail felt rough and splintered beneath my palms, sun-warmed wood gun soft with age and neglect. I stayed there, hands gripping it like a vice, while Dad's voice droned on behind the screen door, sweet as molasses and twice as fake. My cousin Travis laughed, that too smooth, practiced kind of laugh. I'd heard it once before when he'd pocketed my allowance by mistake at age 11. Only this time the stakes weren't a few crumpled dollar bills. They were talking about the farm. My farm. I grew up with dirt under my fingernails and creek water in my shoes. We didn't have much, but we had 86 acres of eastern Kentucky clay, thick woods on the back ridge, and a red barn that leaned a little farther each year. My earliest memory is tagging along behind Dad, bouncing in the bed of the old Ford with a crate of chicks between my knees and the sun coming up pink over the holler. He'd hand me the keys to the tractor like it was a rite of passage. Said someday the whole place would be mine. He said it every birthday, every graduation, every time we patched a fence together or took calves to auction. He said it after Mom died, too, eyes rimmed red from grief and bourbon. Just you and me now, Eli, this land's your legacy. But 3 weeks ago I got a call. From Travis. Hey, cousin, he said like we were still close, like he hadn't ghosted the family for 5 years to sell God knows what in Nashville. Uncle Ray said I should come on down, said we ought to talk about the future of the farm. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at my phone like it might explode in my hand. Then I hung up. The next day Travis showed up anyway. I didn't hear from Dad directly until this morning. He called at 6:42 a.m., early enough to sound like he was doing something important, like planting or feeding, but I could tell he was just packing the kitchen by the way his voice echoed. Morning, son, he said. Travis is already here. Figured we'd all sit down together today. What for? I asked, already knowing. Just talk. You already sold it, didn't you? There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the refrigerator hum through the line. I did what I thought was right, he said. I didn't answer, I just hung up again, grabbed my keys and started driving. That's how I ended up on the porch again. Same wood, same smell like hay and old grease, and a little bit of diesel smoke caught in the boards. I'd been away for nearly a year. Not out of spite, just needed to figure some things out, take care of bills, catch up on life, but I always figured the farm would be there when I came back. My name wasn't on a deed, but my boot prints were in every row of dirt. My blood was in the barn beams. My memories were stitched into every acre like invisible thread. Now I was listening to my own father talk about new opportunities and consolidating resources, while my cousin drank coffee from the mug I made in 6th grade ceramics. Travis stepped onto the porch before I could decide whether to knock or leave. Well, he grinned. Eli the prodigal, you finally made it. I didn't answer, just nodded once tight. You want some coffee? He asked, motioning toward the screen door. Your old man's brewing the strong stuff. I brushed past him. The kitchen was smaller than I remembered. Not physically, it just felt that way, like the air had thickened somehow. Dad sat at the table, same flannel shirt he always wore when he was about to tell you something you didn't want to hear. The deed was sitting right there on the table. No envelope, no pretense. Morning, son, he said, as if nothing was broken. I didn't sit. You sold it. He nodded. To Travis. Another nod. But you promised. I know what I said. Then why? He looked down at the table, eyes skimming the wood grain like it might hold some divine excuse. Then he exhaled through his nose. Because you left, he said. Those words hit harder than anything else. Because I left. I didn't storm off, I didn't slam a door or cuss him out or abandon anything. I went to Louisville for work. I sent money when the roof caved in on the chicken coop. I came back every other weekend until the gas got too expensive. I called. Don't do that, I said, voice low. Don't act like I gave up on this place. You didn't, he said, still not meeting my eyes. But you weren't here, Travis was. He showed up last week. And he's staying. He's got ideas, Eli. Knows some folks who might invest, turn this place into something sustainable. So it's about money. It's about keeping the farm alive, he snapped. I stared at him. Then at the deed. Then at Travis, who was suddenly real quiet in the doorway, holding that mug like a trophy. Later that day, I walked the property line alone. The woods on the back acre were thick this time of year, green and buzzing with summer life. Deer trails, blackberry thickets, the creek still babbling low like it always had. This was the one spot Travis didn't know about. Nobody did, really. I used to come here after school, lie on the rock shelf by the water, draw in a beat-up sketchbook I kept hidden in the roots of the big sycamore. I sat there again that afternoon, fingers digging into the dirt. I didn't cry. But something else inside me shifted. Not rage, not grief. Resolve. 2 days later, I was back with a tent, a camp stove, and a notarized lease from the county clerk. 1 acre, exactly one, parcel 87B the back acre, unclaimed, unlisted, and legally up for grabs since the zoning adjustment last fall. Travis hadn't known, Dad hadn't looked, but I had. I wasn't trying to start a war. I just wanted my peace. Travis came out on the third day. He found me splitting kindling behind the tarp I'd strung between 2 trees. I had a folding chair, a cooler full of cheap beer, and a flag I'd planted in the clay, an old work shirt tied to a stick, fluttering like it meant something. "You're serious?" he asked, arms crossed. I didn't answer. "You know this is pathetic, right?" Still didn't answer. He kicked a rock, muttered something under his breath, and walked off. Dad didn't come until a week later. He didn't say much either, just stood there, staring at the little fire I'd made, the way my gear was stacked neat like I was staying for good. "This what you want?" he asked. "No," I said. "But it's what I've got left." "You always were stubborn," Dad said, not looking at me. He squinted at the fire like it might give him a better answer than I would. "Your mom used to say you argue with a fence post if it gave you a reason." I tossed another piece of dry wood into the pit, the flames catching fast. The sound was clean and sharp, the kindling hissing as the fire took it. I didn't respond, not right away. I knew better. With Dad, silence was its own kind of statement. He finally sat on the flat rock I'd cleared by the creek. Same place he used to bring me when I was little and we'd fish bluegill in the shallows. "You planning to live out here?" he asked. "For now." "What's your plan?" "This acre's mine, I'll figure the rest out." He rubbed his face with a hand that looked more tired than I remembered. The calluses were still there, but there was something else, something like regret trying not to show itself. "You think this is gonna change anything?" he said. I looked at him, really looked. Same deep creases around his mouth. Same hard-set jaw he'd passed down to me, but his eyes had lost something, some spark that used to flicker there when we built things together, fixed the tractor, raced a storm to get the hay covered. "You gave away everything," I said, "so yeah, I'm holding on to something." He didn't fight back, didn't yell, didn't even defend the choice. And that told me everything I needed to know. By the end of the week, word had gotten out. Miss Harper from the gas station waved at me different, more like a question than a hello. Jimmy Pollard, the mailman who'd watched me grow up, drove real slow past the edge of the property one morning and left a brown envelope tucked into the fence post. No stamp. Inside was a note in looping cursive. "Eli, you're not wrong. Proud of you. J." Small towns talk, small towns also take sides. Travis didn't like that. He came stomping back one afternoon while I was trying to rig a rain catch off the tarp. He had on a button-down shirt like he was heading to a business brunch instead of crossing a muddy cow path. "You done with your little protest yet?" he barked. I didn't even look up. He kicked the plastic bucket I just placed. "You're embarrassing the whole family." "No," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "You and Dad did that without my help." He stepped in closer. "Look, this isn't personal." "Isn't it?" He fumbled just a beat. "It's about the future. I've got real ideas, Eli. Agritourism, man, heritage crops. We're gonna host weddings by the barn next spring." "You don't even like farms." "I like opportunity, something you never learned." He left before I could throw the bucket at him. That night, the rain hit harder than expected. Sheets of it pounded the tarp, soaked the edges of my tent. The creek swelled, muddy and fast. I huddled inside, flashlight dancing across the nylon roof, and felt like I was 13 again, camping out with my buddy Seth during a thunderstorm, convinced the trees would fall on us. Only now there was no buddy, no backup. Just me and 1 acre that barely felt like enough to stand on. The next morning, I woke up to find a basket tied with a piece of twine at the base of a tree near my camp. Inside, 4 eggs, a loaf of cornbread, and a tiny mason jar of jam. No note. A silent message. Somebody still believed in me. A few days later, I made my first real move. The land records office in town had a public database. Took a while to figure out the parcel maps and boundary updates, but once I did, it got interesting fast. Turns out the sale Dad made to Travis wasn't a clean sweep. there were 5 separate deeds. 4 had been signed over in full. The 5th, pending, still waiting on county processing. And guess what? It included access easement rights that ran right through the edge of my acre. Legally, I was allowed to cross that path with agricultural tools, water equipment, and livestock access. I printed the document and laminated it, zip-tied a copy to the new post I'd planted just past the creek. And then I bought 2 chickens. "Are you kidding me?" Travis shouted when he showed up 2 mornings later to find the hens scratching at the edge of his gravel turnaround. "They wandered," I said, sipping coffee from a tin mug. "Keep them off my land." "I'm allowed," Dad said. "Dad doesn't own the right-of-way anymore. Read the easement clause." Travis stomped away cussing. One of the hens squawked and flapped at him like she was on my side. I named her Betty. I spent the next week building. Nothing fancy, just a shed frame, open walls, some chicken wire, and a water catch barrel. But it felt real. I'd work from sunrise to dusk, break only when the heat got too thick to breathe. A neighbor I hadn't seen since high school, Marcus Ray, pulled up in a truck one evening. "Thought you might need this," he said, tossing me a toolbox. "Thanks." He paused. "You staying out here for good?" "Yeah." "You gonna fight M?" I didn't answer. He nodded anyway. "I'd do the same." The next bomb dropped on a Tuesday. A certified letter, delivered in person by a county rep. Notice of unauthorized structure, parcel 87B. I was being cited for building without permit approval. Fine $1,200. Compliance deadline 14 days. Remedy: remove all non-conforming improvements. I stared at the notice for a long time, then drove straight to the county office. Ms. Tilda at the front desk looked startled when I walked in. I handed her the letter. "This legit?" She frowned, adjusted her glasses. "Where'd this come from?" "Says county code enforcement." "That's strange, we haven't done a sweep in that zone since May." She made a phone call, then another. By the 3rd call, I could tell something was off. 10 minutes later, she handed me a new paper. No active enforcement action scheduled, no permit complaint logged, disregard notice unless formally contacted. I walked out shaking. And I knew. Travis had faked it. I didn't go to Dad right away, I needed proof. So I waited. And waited. Until finally last night I found it. A message left on the printer queue at the community center where Travis had volunteered to help digitize farm records. Document title: Unofficial Notice, Structure Violation Template. He didn't even bother to change the file name. I took a picture, printed 3 copies. Tomorrow I'll bring one to Dad. The 2nd to the county clerk. And the 3rd. That one's for Travis. I'm going to mail it. With a sticky note on top that just says, "You're not the only one who knows how to print things." It was 5:17 p.m. on a Wednesday when I finally put the envelope on Dad's kitchen table. He wasn't home, probably still out by the road, helping Travis look respectable while pretending not to see through him. The kitchen smelled like old coffee and something burnt. The same busted clock on the wall still blinked 12:00 like it had for years, even though I'd offered to fix it every time I visited. I didn't stay. I just left the envelope there, taped to the worn edge of the salt shaker he used every morning like ritual. It held the photo of Travis's fake citation, a copy of the printer log from the community center, and a note in my handwriting. "If you're going to give away your legacy, at least know who you're handing it to. Eli." Then I walked back to my acre. It didn't feel like much, but it was mine, and I'd earned every inch of it the hard way. 2 nights later, the knock on my tent pole came just after sunset. Dad, holding a plastic grocery sack and a 6-pack of warm beer. "You got time to talk?" he asked. "I always had time," I said. "You just stopped showing up." He looked older than the last time I really looked at him, like something had cracked in the weeks since this all began, and now he couldn't glue it back the same way. "I read it," he said, settling onto the rock beside my fire pit. "The envelope, the proof. And I was wrong." The words came out flat, quiet, almost like they hurt to say. I believed him, but it didn't change anything yet. I kept stoking the fire while he talked. He came back when you were gone, he said. Offered help, offered plans, I guess. I just wanted to believe someone still cared about this place as much as I did. I did care, I said. I just didn't make it about me. I worked, paid the feed bill when the soy prices dropped, came back when I could, never once stopped believing you meant what you said. He nodded slowly, staring into the flames. He showed me numbers, graphs, talked about turning the barn into a boutique venue, said the acreage could host a rustic farm-to-table experience. I nearly laughed. This isn't Napa Valley, Dad, it's Floyd County. I know, he muttered. There was a long silence, then. I didn't mean to betray you. But you did. He didn't argue. I wanted to do right by your mother's memory, he finally said. Thought maybe if the place was making money, we could keep it alive. She wouldn't have wanted it sold. I know. He reached into the bag and pulled out a battered leather-bound folder. I knew it before he handed it to me, Mom's will. We'd never read it all the way through. She passed suddenly. There were no clear instructions, no executor drama, just grief and a fog of paperwork. Back then, Dad took the lead. I was 19, barely holding it together. You should see page 4, he said. I opened it under the light of my flashlight. And there it was. In the event of my passing, I request that the property at 742 Ridgeview Lane remain in the lineage of my son, Eli Ray Trenton, in honor of the roots he has sown there. My name. In her handwriting. I didn't even realize I'd been holding my breath until the wind kicked the edge of the paper and I blinked. She wanted me to have it, I whispered. I think deep down I did too, Dad said, but I let the wrong person talk me out of it. The next day, I took the will to the county clerk. They said it would take time, especially since the transfer had already been processed. But Mom's original will, coupled with the forged letter Travis printed, might be enough to open a fraudulent conveyance case. Are you looking to sue? The clerk asked. I hesitated. It wasn't about money, it wasn't even about revenge. It was about keeping the farm in the family, for real. Back at camp, I sat by the creek and listened to the cicadas start up. The sun dipped behind the ridge. I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Calm. Like the land was nodding in quiet approval. 3 days passed, then Travis returned. He didn't walk up like before. This time he roared in with that silver truck of his, tires kicking gravel and dirt across the ditch. I was feeding the hens. He jumped out, waving a paper in one hand. You trying to ruin me? He yelled. I kept walking toward the coop. You reported me to the county, brought up Mom's will, what the hell, Eli? I turned calm. You forged a citation and tried to force me off the only acre I had. You really want to talk about ethics now? You're dragging my name through the mud. You did that yourself. He threw the paper down, some kind of cease and desist, drafted by a lawyer who clearly didn't know the backstory. This is war, he hissed. I looked at the edge of the woods, where Mom's wild irises still bloomed each spring in a crooked line along the fence. No, I said, this is family, and you broke it. 2 days later, the real letter came, not from Travis, but from a judge. A court date. Motion to review the property transfer under pre-existing family will. If the judge ruled in favor of Mom's clause, the entire sale could be reversed. Dad showed up again that night. You sure you want to go through with this? I'm sure. He nodded. You know, if you win, it means Travis might leave for good. Let him. I raised you both. No, I said, you raised me. He showed up when it suited him. Court was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, I stayed on the acre, made improvements, hung a small wooden sign on the post by the road. Backacre Farm S 2025. Miss Harper dropped off a sack of seed potatoes. Jimmy Pollard gave me 2 salt blocks he found in his shed. Marcus brought me his spare chainsaw. People knew. They didn't say much, but they knew. And they were choosing sides. Quietly, steadily. Then the envelope came. Another one. Plain, no return address. Inside. A photo. Me sleeping in my tent. Taken from across the creek. No note. No context. Just a warning. Travis wasn't going to fight fair. I never used to think of Travis as dangerous. Manipulative, yes. A liar, sure. The kind of guy who'd borrow your truck and return it without gas, but not a threat. Not until I saw that photo. the one of me sleeping in my tent taken from across the creek from a spot nobody should have been. That changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire, hat pulled low, a shovel laid across my lap, not for show. I wasn't about to get jumped without a way to defend myself. The hens clucked softly in their coop behind me, and every snapping twig in the dark sent my eyes darting toward the woods. But no one came. Not that night. The next morning, I walked the perimeter of my acre with fresh eyes. I found 2 cigarette butts under the sycamore and a crushed Red Bull can behind the tool shed. Fresh, still sticky. I'd been watched. For how long, I didn't know. I took the photo to Sheriff Deason. He squinted at it like it was a crossword puzzle, then leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "You want to file a restraining order?" he asked. "I want you to make a record, just in case." He nodded slow. "Between you and me," he said, "Travis's name been floating around town lately. Word is this agritourism plan of his, full of hot air, no one's investing, he's on a clock and he knows it." I didn't say anything, just picked up the photo and left. Back on the acre, I reinforced the chicken coop, added a latch to the tent zipper, and started keeping a bat by my bedroll, not because I thought he'd try anything that stupid, but because now I wasn't sure he wouldn't. 4 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman. "Is this Eli Trenton?" "Yes." "I'm calling on behalf of Meadow Ridge Bank. We're processing a lien against 742 Ridgeview Lane." I froze. "What?" "There's an outstanding debt tied to the secondary mortgage on the property. We've attempted to reach the listed owner, Travis Godwin, but haven't received payment." My mouth went dry. "So what does that mean?" "If payment is not made within 15 days, the bank will move to seize and auction the property." I drove straight to Dad. The front door was open. He was sitting at the table, staring at a stack of paperwork, hands shaking slightly as he tried to pour coffee into a chipped mug. "You knew," I said. He didn't look up. "I didn't sign off on it. Travis used the new title to get a loan, said it was for infrastructure, wedding venue lights, barn renovations. But he didn't use it for that." Dad didn't answer. I grabbed the top page of the paperwork. It was all there. Travis had leveraged the entire farm, not just his portion. It was in default. "He mortgaged our history for a pipe dream," I said. Dad put the mug down. "I made a mistake." "No," I snapped, "you made a choice." He flinched. I left before I said something I couldn't walk back. Back on my acre, I called an old friend, Kim. She worked at the local newspaper now. We hadn't spoken in a year, maybe more, but I told her everything. The sale, the fake citation, the photo, the lien. She whistled low through the phone. "Want me to run it?" Front page. 2 days later, the story broke. Family farm in jeopardy after dubious transfer. Local man battles back from the back acre. There was even a photo, me standing by the coop, arms crossed, the homemade sign in the background. Travis showed up within hours. This time, he didn't park at the gravel lot. He drove straight up the path, tires spinning in the dirt until he skidded halfway across my tarp ground sheet. He jumped out well-dyed. "You think this makes you a hero?" he shouted. "You made yourself the villain," I said. "You're ruining everything." "No," I said, "you did that the second you turned a promise into a payday." He lunged. I was ready. We wrestled hard, dirt flying, fists slamming into shoulders, ribs, arms. No one threw punches like they meant to kill, but it wasn't clean either. More like brothers trying to settle something 10 years overdue. He was stronger, but I was angrier. We broke apart when Dad's voice rang out. "Enough." He was standing at the edge of the trees, shotgun cradled in both hands, not raised but not casual either. "I let this go too far," he said. "I thought I could fix it by ignoring it. I was wrong." He looked at Travis. "You've got until sunset to pack your things and go." "Dad, no." Then he turned to me. "And you, don't let this place harden you." I stood there, chest heaving, mud on my shirt, blood on my lip. "I'm just trying to protect what's left." That night, Travis left. Didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just peeled out down the gravel road with half his tail light busted and a duffel in the truck bed. Dad and I watched him disappear into the dusk. He'll probably blame us forever, Dad said. I shrugged, let him. We sat by the fire in silence. Then Dad reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. I talked to the lawyer, he said. If the judge agrees, the deed can revert to me. He nodded. And the land? I'll cover it. I stared at him. He looked back, eyes glassy. I lost the land once already, he said. I won't do it again. I didn't say thank you. Not out of spite. Just because some things are too big for words. We just sat there, father and son, watching the flames dance between us. The court date is tomorrow. And I'm ready. The manila folder wasn't heavy, just honest. It sat between me and the court clerk like a silent middleman, filled with scanned copies of a broken promise and one last shot at setting things right. I didn't touch it, not yet. Dad sat to my left, fingers laced together, elbows on knees. He hadn't said a word since we arrived, didn't need to, there wasn't much left to explain. Travis sat across the aisle. Sunglasses, dress shirt with the top button open, no tie. The smirk he wore when we were kids was long gone, replaced with something tighter, more bitter. His lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but Travis just nodded without turning his head. He looked smaller than usual. Or maybe I'd finally stopped giving him my space. The bailiff called the room to order. The judge walked in, a silver-haired woman named Judge Norcross. She looked over the docket, adjusted her glasses, and then said the words I'd been waiting to hear for months. This is a motion to review the transfer of agricultural property at 742 Ridgeview Lane, in light of a pre-existing familial will and allegations of fraudulent activity. My lawyer stood. So did theirs. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No surprise witnesses. Just facts. Cold, clear, and irreversible. Mom's handwritten clause witnessed and notarized, the forged citation document, the bank's lien notice, Travis's print job timestamped by the community center, the easement rights I'd claimed legally and properly, a timeline too perfect to be coincidence. When Travis's lawyer tried to argue lack of intent, the judge cut him off. Intent does not erase falsification, nor does it override legal priority from a decedent's will. The document clearly states her wishes, and Mr. Trenton has proven consistent stewardship. Judge Norcross tapped her pen on the bench. Then she looked up. Mr. Godwin, the court finds your acquisition of the property was conducted under misrepresentation. The sale is hereby reversed. The land in question will revert to the prior ownership as outlined in the will of Carolyn Trenton, effective immediately. Travis opened his mouth. She raised a hand. Further appeals will not delay execution of the reversal. And just like that, it was done. Outside the courthouse, the sky was overcast, but the air felt lighter. I stood on the steps, hands on the rail, while Dad called someone at the bank to begin the lien release paperwork. He spoke with more confidence than I'd heard in years, like the weight he'd been carrying since Mom died had finally lifted. Travis walked past me without a word. No threats, no looks. Just a man who'd gambled and lost. Maybe someday he'd understand why. Maybe not. 3 weeks later, I stood at the edge of the property with a paintbrush in hand. The red barn had a fresh coat, the coop had expanded. I'd started planting sorghum, just a half-acre trial, but it felt good, like movement, real movement. Dad stepped up beside me. Thought you might want this, he said, handing me a ring of keys. They were old, scratched, familiar. The main gate, he said, the pump house, and the lock to the feed shed. I took them. Felt their weight in my palms. He wasn't just giving me access. He was giving me ownership. I renamed the farm. Not out of spite, but because names matter. The new wooden sign read, Second Root Farm reclaimed by blood and soil. People started stopping by. Jimmy dropped off another crate of egg cartons. Miss Harper gave me a goat that needed a home. Marcus came to help dig the irrigation trench on weekends. The land was breathing again. Not just dirt and wood and fences, but alive. And this time I wasn't clinging to 1 acre in protest. I had the whole thing. And I was building forward. One morning I walked the trail behind the creek, past the sycamore, up to the ridge that overlooked the back field. The light hit just right, long shadows cutting across rows of young plants. I stood there a long time. And I thought about legacy, not as something inherited, but something earned. I still think about Mom, sometimes when I'm brushing mud off my boots or fixing a busted gate hinge. I think about what she saw in me, what she put down in that will, and how long it took me to realize it wasn't just about land. It was about roots, and whether I chose to stay and grow them. Now I have, and no one can take that away again. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.